My son left me at the airport. Said, "Find your own way." I did, in first class on his credit card. The wind at O'Hare that morning cut sharper than memory. I stood outside the terminal, clutching my purse the way an old soldier might hold his last weapon. My son Evan was driving, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping the steering column in irritation. Beside him, my daughter-in-law Clara scrolled through her phone, long red nails clicking like small insults. The heater was blasting, but the air inside the car felt colder than the snow outside. I tried to make conversation, said something about how bright the sunrise looked over the freeway, but Clara barely glanced up. "You smell like old medicine," she said, wrinkling her nose. "No wonder Dad never took you on trips." Evan's lips tightened. "Clara," I whispered, "please." He just sighed. "We've done enough for you, Mom. You said you wanted to visit Aunt May in Nevada. Fine, we bought your ticket. After that, find your own way for once." He said they had another flight to Vegas, a business trip, he called it, and that I'd be fine catching mine alone. His tone was the kind that left no room for air. I looked down at my hands, thin, veined, shaking from neither cold nor age, but from the kind of ache you do not take to doctors. I had spent 40 years working double shifts in hospitals, washing blood off my shoes before coming home to make him dinner. I never imagined this would be the conversation we'd end up having. The traffic hissed and roared around us. When the terminal sign appeared, Evan slowed the car, flicked the blinker, and stopped at the curb. He opened the trunk, took out my small suitcase, and set it down roughly on the wet pavement. No hug, no kiss, not even a "take care." Just the sound of luggage wheels scraping concrete. Clara looked over her sunglasses and smirked. "Maybe someone here will adopt you. Try not to embarrass us." Then she turned up the radio. I bent down to pick up my purse. The clasp was broken, and everything inside spilled onto the ground: an old handkerchief, my husband's pocket watch, a single envelope with my boarding pass, and one small credit card with my name beneath Evan's. He had given it to me years ago, saying it was for groceries and emergencies only. I wiped the card clean of dirt, my fingers numb. Evan leaned against the car door, voice low but hard. "Mom, seriously, we have our own flight to Vegas to catch. Don't make this harder than it has to be." "A flight?" I repeated. "I thought we were—" He cut me off. "Not we, you. Your ticket's for gate C12. You'll manage." The words landed heavier than the suitcase. "Find your own way," he said again, as if it were a blessing. Then he got into the car. For a second I thought he might look back. He didn't. The car door slammed, the engine growled. Snow water splashed over my shoes as they drove off. The crowd moved around me, families hugging, children laughing, people calling Ubers and waving goodbyes. I must have looked ridiculous. A 72-year-old woman standing in the middle of the drop-off zone, clutching a suitcase and a credit card like a lifeline. The airport wind carried the smell of fuel and coffee. It filled my lungs until it hurt. A security guard gave me a sympathetic glance. I smiled weakly, pretending this was all fine, that I was just waiting for someone. But the truth sank in slowly, like frost through skin. My own son had left me there, not by accident, not out of confusion, but by choice. I took a deep breath, steadied my hands, and whispered to myself, "You wanted quiet, Ruby. Well, you have it now." Then I looked up at the glass facade of the terminal, the flights blinking on the departure board like chances I'd never taken. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I stepped inside, my shoes squeaking against the floor. The warmth hit my face, fogging my glasses. A woman at the information desk smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" I almost said no, but something inside me shifted. My whole life had been spent asking for less. Maybe it was time to ask for more. "I need to get to Nevada," I said quietly. "Of course. Do you have a reservation?" I handed her my boarding pass. She looked at it, frowned. "This flight was canceled 3 hours ago. Weather delay in Denver." I blinked, confused. "Then what happens now?" She shrugged kindly. You can book another route, maybe through Las Vegas. Do you have a card to hold the fare? I stared at the one in my hand, the card Evan had forgotten existed. It caught the fluorescent light like a secret, finally ready to speak. As I signed the receipt, the woman at the counter smiled. Would you like to choose your seat? I hesitated, then pointed to the top of the list. First class, I said. She raised her eyebrows, surprised but professional. Excellent choice, ma'am. I took the ticket and turned toward the gate. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like baggage someone had to carry. The intercom crackled overhead, calling passengers to board. I looked back once toward the exit, half expecting to see Evan's car returning. It never did. So I whispered to myself, as if sealing a promise. Find my own way? Fine. Let's see where that road leads. The terminal was colder than I expected for a building full of people. I sat near the wide glass windows, watching planes rise one by one into the gray December sky. The one that carried my son had left 20 minutes ago. Las Vegas. I knew it because I had seen the gate number flash across the screen while waiting for my canceled flight to nowhere. I imagined Evan and Clara sitting side by side, ordering champagne, maybe laughing about how they'd finally set me free. I rested my hands on the small credit card in my lap. It was the only thing that felt solid anymore. Evan had given it to me years ago when I moved in after my hip surgery. He'd said, "For groceries and doctor's visits, Mom, don't get ideas." I hadn't. I'd used it sparingly: milk, prescriptions, sometimes a birthday card for Ruby from church. But now, it sat in my palm like something heavier than money. Through the glass, I saw the frost on the tarmac, glimmering like ground glass. My reflection looked older than I remembered, lined, tired, but not defeated. Not yet. A young couple nearby took selfies with their matching designer luggage. The woman held up her phone, laughing. "Vegas, baby, we're gonna make memories." Her voice was the same pitch Clara used whenever she wanted to sound rich. I looked away. My thoughts wandered back, uninvited, to the day Evan begged for help. It was 3 years ago, just after the pandemic shut his logistics firm down. He'd shown up at my apartment with dark circles under his eyes and a printed spreadsheet full of numbers I didn't understand. "I just need 80,000, Mom," he said, gripping my hands. "A bridge loan. I'll pay you back the moment we stabilize." I had just sold Harold's car that week, our last piece of something shared, and the money sat untouched in my account. "It's your father's," I'd said. "He'd want you to have it," Evan cried when he took the check. I'd thought it was gratitude. Maybe it was just relief. 6 months later, his company exploded in success. News outlets called him Illinois' rising entrepreneur. In one interview, I saw him on TV saying, "No one helped me build this. I did it myself." I remember the sound of the coffee mug shattering on the kitchen floor. Clara had always known which knife to twist. At family gatherings, she'd smile sweetly at me and say, "We just can't keep taking care of her forever. She's like a charity case we can't return." The others laughed awkwardly, and I pretended not to hear. Now, sitting in that terminal, I could almost hear Harold's voice again, soft and warm like the hum of his old record player. "If the world ever leaves you stranded, remember, you were the one who built their wings." I whispered the line to myself, "The way you touch an old scar." Across from me, a woman with kind eyes and a business blazer sat scrolling through her phone. After a while, she looked up and said casually, "You waiting for someone, ma'am?" I shook my head. "No, they already left." She nodded in that way strangers do when they know not to ask. Then her gaze dropped to the credit card I was holding. "You know," she said gently, "if you have a credit card, you can fly standby anywhere in the country. Sometimes even first class, if the seats are open." For a second, I thought she was joking. Then she smiled and turned back to her phone, but the words stayed. "Fly anywhere." I looked down at the card again. Evan's name embossed in silver above mine. I ran my thumb over it. "He said I should find my own way," I murmured. The air around me seemed to hum. Guess I just did. I stood, the decision already burning through the hesitation. The line at the ticket counter was short. I took my place behind a man in a leather jacket and watched the board flicker with destinations. Phoenix, Miami, Las Vegas. When it was my turn, the clerk smiled automatically. Where to today, ma'am? I hesitated only a second before saying, Las Vegas. Any specific seat preference? She asked, fingers poised above the keyboard. I thought of Evan's voice, flat and cruel. Find your own way. Then I thought of the smug tilt of Clara's chin. The memory felt like wind pushing me forward. First class, I said. The clerk blinked. Excellent choice. She entered the details, then slid the small screen toward me. Card, please. My hand didn't shake when I placed it down. The beep was quick, decisive, final. As she printed the boarding pass, I felt something loosen inside me. A knot untying after years of holding its breath. Your gate is B7, the clerk said cheerfully. Boarding in 40 minutes. Enjoy your flight. Enjoy your flight. I walked away slowly, ticket in hand, passing rows of people glued to their phones, families hugging, businessmen barking into headsets. None of them looked at me. That was fine. For once, anonymity felt like armor. At the gate, I sat down, breathing in the sterile air of recycled heat and jet fuel. On the giant screen above, my destination blinked in white letters, LAS Vegas, on time. A laugh escaped me, small, unsteady, but real. I whispered, if they want distance, I'll make it worth the ticket. Outside, another plane lifted off, slicing through the pale sky like an answer I didn't know I needed. The hum of the engines was soft, almost soothing, like the deep breath before a storm. I sat in seat 1A, my hands folded neatly over the blanket they'd offered me, trying not to look like someone who had never sat this close to the front of a plane before. The leather smelled expensive. The air felt different here, quiet, cool, controlled. A flight attendant poured champagne into a crystal glass and smiled. Would you like orange juice with it, ma'am? She asked. No, thank you, I said. I think I've earned it as it is. I took a sip. The bubbles burned just enough to remind me I was still alive. Through the small window, the last of the Illinois snow blurred into clouds. I was heading toward Las Vegas, the same place my son was going, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't following anyone's lead. I was leading myself. I was flipping through the safety card when I heard the sound that made my stomach tighten. Clara's voice, high and impatient. Excuse me, this is ridiculous. My husband and I were supposed to sit together in first class. I didn't turn around right away. I didn't have to. The moment I heard Evan's voice, cold as always, I knew exactly what came next. Ma'am, there must be some mistake. That's my seat. The flight attendant frowned politely. Your seat is 1B, sir. The passenger in 1A checked in 30 minutes ago, Mrs. Ruby Henson. There was a pause long enough to taste. Then Clara's voice sharpened. What the hell are you doing here? I turned, slow and calm, as if I'd been waiting for that question all my life. I raised my glass and smiled. You told me to find my own way, I said, letting the words roll out like a toast. I just found yours. Laughter rippled through the row behind us, stifled and awkward, but very real. Evan's face turned the color of raw anger. You can't use that card, he snapped. That's mine. The flight attendant blinked, unbothered. Actually, sir, this transaction was authorized through your primary account ending in 291. Full payment cleared. Is there an issue? Evan opened his mouth, closed it again, then muttered, Cancel it. Right now. I didn't approve this. She tilted her head, checking her tablet. I'm afraid I can't. The system is showing the card as temporarily locked due to unusual activity. You'll need to contact your bank directly. The silence that followed was exquisite. I took another sip of champagne, watching Clara's perfectly powdered face lose all its color. Looks like karma travels faster than planes, I said softly, setting the glass down. Evan turned to the flight attendant, voice trembling now. We can't sit here with her. The attendant's smile was smooth, professional, and just sharp enough. Of course, sir. I can offer to downgrade you to coach if that's more comfortable. A few chuckles rose from nearby passengers. Clara hissed under her breath, You're embarrassing us. I leaned back in my seat, folding the blanket over my lap. No, dear, I said. You did that yourselves. For a moment, I could almost see the boy he used to be, the one who'd cried when I packed his lunch in the wrong color box, the one who hugged my leg on the first day of school. But that boy was gone, buried somewhere under the man who left me on a curb. Clara crossed her arms and stared straight ahead, pretending I wasn't there. Evan pulled out his phone, scrolling furiously, but the Wi-Fi hadn't connected yet. For the next few hours, he was trapped, me beside him, karma above him, and nowhere to run. The engines roared as we took off, and I felt the press of gravity push me back into the seat. I closed my eyes and smiled at the irony. The son who told me to find my own way was now sitting 2 feet away, powerless, his credit card paying for my peace. I turned slightly toward the window. The clouds were white and endless, stretching like forgiveness I didn't owe. I whispered to myself, barely audible under the hum, "First class, Harold. Can you believe it?" The seatbelt light turned off. Clara ordered a vodka tonic. Evan asked for water and didn't drink it. I asked for another glass of champagne. Somewhere between Illinois and Nevada, I realized I was no longer afraid of being left behind. I had been left, yes, but this time, it had led me somewhere higher. The flight attendant passed again, smiling kindly. "Are you comfortable, ma'am?" I nodded. "Perfectly," I said, closing my eyes. The quiet wrapped around me like a soft blanket. I leaned my head back and drifted into the most peaceful sleep I'd had in years, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the fall. Las Vegas hit me like a fever dream, bright, loud, and too awake for anyone my age to belong in. The Bellagio's marble lobby glowed under chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks. I checked in quietly, luggage rolling behind me, the concierge calling me Mrs. Henson with a warmth my own son hadn't managed in years. My keycard read room 2104, Fountain View. I smiled at the irony. A room with a view for someone who'd been invisible her whole life. By the time Evan and Clara's flight landed, I was already unpacking, folding my clothes into drawers like I meant to stay a while. I turned on the air conditioning and sat by the window, watching the fountains dance outside, bursts of water moving in perfect rhythm to a song I couldn't quite name. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I felt deliberate. The hotel Wi-Fi pinged, and I opened my email out of habit. A new message blinked on the screen. Transaction confirmation. Evan Henson, card ending 291. My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought he had finally canceled the card, that this tiny victory of mine was already being erased. But then I saw another attachment, a PDF statement, automatically sent to my secondary email. The same one Evan had linked years ago, so he could, in his words, "help you monitor your spending, Mom." I clicked it open. Rows and rows of transactions filled the screen. Groceries, pharmacy bills, small purchases from years past. But near the bottom, one entry stood out like a wound. Insurance fund withdrawal, $250,000. Date, 8 months ago. Account name, Ruby Henson. Signature authorization, R. Henson. I blinked hard, thinking maybe the glare from the glass had tricked my eyes, but the letters didn't move. My breath went shallow. My husband Harold's life insurance money he'd left for me had been withdrawn in full, under my name. The room went quiet except for the sound of the air conditioner whispering. I remembered the day Harold signed that policy, sitting at the kitchen table in his old cardigan. "This is for you," he'd said. "If something ever happens to me, I want you safe. Promise me you'll use it for yourself, Ruby." But I hadn't used a single cent. Evan had said it was frozen for tax purposes. I'd believed him. My hands trembled as I scrolled further. The withdrawal had been made through his company's business account, disguised as operational reimbursement. The contact email listed was his. He hadn't just stolen from me. He'd stolen from Harold's memory. A knock at the door startled me. Room service, a polite man wheeling in a tray of fruit and tea. I tipped him absently, then sat at the table staring at the silver teapot's reflection of my own face. I looked like someone who'd lived too long in other people's stories. It was time to write mine. I picked up the phone and dialed the number I hadn't used in 15 years. Frank Doyle, attorney at law, my husband's old friend. The line rang 3 times before a deep voice answered. Doyle speaking. Frank, I said, my voice barely steady. It's Ruby. Ruby Henson. There was a pause. Ruby? Good Lord, I thought you'd moved to Florida. I tried reaching you years ago, your email kept bouncing. My son managed my email, I said softly. Apparently he managed a lot more. I told him everything. The PDF, the withdrawal, the forged signature. When I finished, there was silence on the line so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Frank spoke, his tone grave. Mrs. Henson, what your son did isn't a misunderstanding. It's federal-level financial fraud. He forged your identity to withdraw funds from a protected account. That's prison time if prosecuted. I stared at the glass wall, the city lights flickering below like fireflies. Can it be proven? Absolutely. I still have the original signature documents from Harold's policy. If your signature doesn't match, and I'm sure it won't, that's all the evidence we need. But Ruby, this won't be easy. It'll mean going public. Your family? Family? I interrupted, my voice cold. He left me at an airport like luggage. He stopped being family when he signed my name. There was a moment of quiet. Then Frank sighed. Then let's make sure justice flies first class too. You always did know how to talk my language. He promised to send me everything I needed by morning. The legal affidavits, the transfer freezes, the statement requests. Keep that PDF secure, he said. It's your ticket to freedom. After we hung up, I forwarded the document to a new email I'd created under a different name. No more being watched, I thought. No more being managed. Outside, the fountains of the Bellagio erupted again, higher this time, sparkling under the night lights like applause from the universe itself. I raised my glass of tea toward the window, whispering to Harold, "You wanted me safe. I'm getting there." Below, the streets pulsed with noise and neon. Somewhere in that same city, Evan and Clara were likely toasting to their good fortune, oblivious that the ground beneath them had already begun to crack. I looked back at the email, the words, "Insurance Fund Withdrawal," glowing coldly on the screen, and whispered to the empty room, "You said I should find my own way. Well, Evan, you just paid for the ticket." The Bellagio lobby shimmered under 1,000 chandeliers, the kind of light that flatters liars and hides their shadows. Evan and Clara stood at the center of it all, radiant in pretense. A violinist played something elegant near the fountain, and waiters glided between tables with trays of champagne. The banner above the archway read, 10 years of love and success, Evan and Clara Henson. Their photographer circled them like a bee around sugar, while Clara live-streamed the whole scene on her phone, her voice sweet as syrup. "To love, to loyalty, and to our beautiful life," she said, flashing the platinum credit card to the camera before tucking it back into Evan's suit pocket. I watched from the edge of the crowd, holding a simple white envelope. My hands didn't shake. I dressed the way Harold used to like me, a navy dress, a silver brooch, and my hair pinned neat and proud. The same woman they'd thrown away at the airport now stood beneath chandeliers brighter than their lies. When Evan finally saw me, his smile froze mid-sentence. "You again?" he hissed under his breath as he stepped closer. "What do you want from us?" I smiled softly, almost kindly. "Nothing," I said, "just to return what's mine." Clara's expression twisted. "Security," she snapped, glancing toward the staff. But before anyone moved, a voice cut through the music. "Mr. Henson?" Every head turned. Frank Doyle stepped through the crowd, followed by a man in a dark suit holding a black briefcase, the representative from First National Bank. Their polished shoes echoed on the marble floor as they approached the couple. "Mr. Evan Henson," Frank said, his tone professional and cool. "Per Section 812 of the Federal Fraud Code, your financial accounts are temporarily frozen pending investigation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones lifted. The live stream camera caught every word, every pale flicker of Evan's face. Evan stammered, "What the hell are you talking about?" The banker opened the briefcase, pulling out a folder thick with documents. "We received confirmation of unauthorized withdrawals from a protected insurance fund belonging to Mrs. Ruby Henson. Evidence includes forged digital signatures and falsified authorization records, effective immediately. All assets linked to your corporate and personal accounts are suspended. Clara's champagne glass shattered against the floor. "You'll destroy us!" she screamed, her voice cracking through the hall. I met her gaze calmly. "No, dear," I said. "You did that when you forgot who built your wings." The violinist stopped playing. The room went still, save for the faint hum of cameras still rolling. Evan tried to speak, but words failed him. His polished image, the successful entrepreneur, the perfect husband, flickered and fell apart under the lights. He looked small now, cornered by truth. Frank handed a final document to the banker. "Federal authorities have already been informed. I suggest you contact your lawyer, Mr. Henson." Evan's legs gave out. He dropped into the nearest chair, face buried in his hands as reporters, influencers, and so-called friends whispered and filmed. The live stream's comment section was already filling with questions, emojis, judgment. Wait, is that his mom? He stole from her? Poetic justice. Clara turned on me, eyes wild. "You think this makes you a hero? You're just a bitter old woman." I took a slow breath. "No, Clara," I said, stepping past her. "I'm just a mother who finally stopped apologizing." Flashbulbs popped as I turned toward the exit. The envelope in my hand, the printed proof of every withdrawal, every lie brushed against my palm like closure. Behind me, Evan's world crumbled in real time, his wife shouting, his guests whispering, his fortune freezing solid. I didn't need to stay and watch it burn. Justice didn't need an audience. As I stepped into the cool desert night, the air smelled of rain on marble and champagne gone flat. The Bellagio fountains erupted again, bright and wild against the sky, drowning out the echoes of his disgrace. For the first time in years, I walked away not as someone left behind, but as someone finally moving forward quietly, completely, and free. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, the scent of truth being scrubbed clean after too many years of dirt. Sunlight slanted through high windows, glinting off the state seal of Illinois carved above the judge's bench. 3 months had passed since that night in Las Vegas. Long enough for gossip to turn into headlines, and headlines to turn into subpoenas. I sat in the front row, my hands folded neatly in my lap. No jewelry, no perfume. Just the small silver brooch Harold once gave me for luck. My heart didn't race anymore. It just beat steady, patient, waiting for justice to breathe. Evan sat across the room at the defendant's table. The suit he wore looked borrowed, a size too large, like the life he'd tried to live. His hair was shorter now, his face drawn tight. Clara sat beside him, mascara smudged, whispering frantic words into his ear. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see I was there, not out of vengeance, but because this time I refused to disappear. The bailiff's voice echoed. "Court is now in session. The state of Illinois versus Evan Henson." The prosecutor, a tall woman in a gray suit, rose and addressed the court. "Your Honor, the state will prove that the defendant, Mr. Henson, engaged in a deliberate, premeditated scheme to defraud his mother, an elderly widow, by forging her identity to withdraw $250,000 in life insurance funds intended for her care. He further concealed this act through false accounting and unauthorized credit extensions." Every word landed like a gavel. Screens lit up on both sides of the courtroom. Exhibits appeared: emails, account logs, digital signatures. Evan's own words, his fake authorizations, his arrogance preserved in data. Then came the recording, his voice on a phone call, laughing with a colleague. "Mom's policy was just sitting there collecting dust. I'm putting that money to real use. She'll never even check her email." The sound of his laughter made my stomach twist, but I didn't flinch. I just sat still and let the silence after the playback say everything words couldn't. Clara began to cry, loudly. Her lawyer tried to quiet her, but she turned toward me, her voice breaking. "Please, Mrs. Henson," I begged him not to. "He said it was temporary. We were drowning in debt, we just needed time." Her tears didn't move me. I'd shed enough for all of us. Evan finally spoke, his tone sharp, desperate. "It wasn't theft, it was business. I was going to reinvest it for her, for the family. It's not like I killed anyone." The prosecutor turned toward him. "Mr. Henson, Did your mother ever give written or verbal consent for you to withdraw her funds? Evan's jaw clenched. It's complicated. Did she? No, he muttered. The prosecutor nodded. Then it's not complicated. It's fraud. The judge leaned forward, his glasses catching the light. Mr. Henson, you forged a federal insurance document, manipulated financial records, and misused elder assets. That is not business. That is betrayal. Evan's voice cracked. She's my mother. I rose slowly, my voice calm but clear. Family isn't business, Evan, I said. But you sold it anyway. He turned to me, eyes wide, as if seeing me for the first time. But there was nothing left for him to recognize. The judge shuffled the papers on his desk. The evidence is overwhelming, he said. The court finds the defendant guilty on all counts: identity fraud, elder financial abuse, and insurance fraud. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like a door closing. Sentence: 8 years in state prison, no parole for the first 3. Restitution of the stolen amount, plus penalties. Mrs. Clara Henson, the judge continued, you are fined for your participation in concealment of financial records and are subject to asset seizure under federal order. Clara let out a sob. Evan's shoulders slumped, his head sinking into his hands. The courtroom murmured, papers rustled, cameras flashed. But I stayed still, watching the sunlight crawl across the floor toward my feet. When the bailiff moved to escort Evan away, he turned once, like a boy caught after breaking a window. Mom, he whispered. For a heartbeat, I wanted to feel pity. But then I remembered the cold wind at O'Hare, the sound of my suitcase hitting the ground, the words, "Find your own way." I stood, straightened my coat, and walked toward the door. Outside, the midday light hit hard, bright, almost cleansing. Reporters called my name, microphones reaching forward like eager hands, but I didn't stop. The courthouse steps felt steep but solid under my feet. At the bottom, I paused, lifting my face to the sun. You told me to find my own way, I whispered. I did. The law showed me the rest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt whole. And as I walked away from the courthouse, the bells from the nearby church began to ring steady, calm, like a promise kept. 6 months later, spring finally reached Illinois. The snow had melted from the sidewalks, and for the first time in years, the old maple tree outside my window bloomed again. I stood on the porch of a house I knew too well, the same one Evan once told me to leave. Its shutters were still crooked, the porch swing still creaked, but the air felt different now. It was mine again. The deed had come through 2 weeks earlier. Between the restitution the court ordered and the insurance funds finally restored, I'd had just enough to buy back the property under my own name. The papers were signed with my real signature this time, steady and proud. I spent the first week cleaning. Dust and silence had gathered in the corners like ghosts. Every room held a memory. The sound of Harold's laughter over the radio, the soft echo of Evan's footsteps when he was still a boy. I left those memories untouched. They were part of the house's bones. On the second week, I hung a wooden sign above the front door. The letters were carved by hand, a gift from a local craftsman who refused payment when he heard my story. It read, Henson House, a safe place for widows. The day I put it up, the wind carried the smell of rain and lilacs. For once, I didn't feel small beneath the sky. I felt like a beginning. By afternoon, there was a knock on the door. A young woman stood there, thin, pale, her hands clutching a small purse like it was armor. She couldn't have been more than 30. Are you Mrs. Henson? She asked softly. I am, I said. Come in, dear. She hesitated before stepping over the threshold, her eyes darting around the freshly painted living room. Someone told me, you help women, she said. My son took my house papers, said he'd manage the bills. Now everything's in his name. Her voice cracked. I saw myself in her, the disbelief, the shame of being betrayed by someone you raised to be good. I guided her to the couch, poured tea into chipped cups Harold and I used to keep for guests. What's your name? Melissa. Well, Melissa, I said gently, men like that forget who raised them, but walls can be rebuilt stronger this time. She wiped her eyes. How did you do it? I smiled. By remembering that justice doesn't come from anger, it comes from proof and patience. We talked for hours. About lawyers, documents, and self-worth, but also about laughter, about starting over. By the time she left, the sky had turned gold and pink, and the house no longer felt empty. That night, I lit a candle on the mantel. The photograph of Harold stood beside it, his kind eyes forever caught in that half-smile. I had placed the picture back in its rightful spot, right above the fireplace. Beneath it, I set a small brass plaque engraved with 3 simple words: paid in full. It wasn't about the money. It was about dignity, about a debt life had tried to collect and failed. Outside, I could hear the faint hum of cars passing by, the world still rushing the way it always did. But inside, time moved differently, slower, kinder. I walked through each room before bed, running my fingers along the walls, whispering to the house like it could hear me. We're home again, I said, and this time, no one's taking it away. When I turned off the lights, I caught my reflection in the window, older, yes, but steady. The kind of woman who'd walked through humiliation, courtrooms, and silence, and still found her way back to light. Tomorrow, another woman might knock on that door, and I'd be ready with tea, with stories, and with proof that even after betrayal, life could bloom again. As I closed the door behind me, the sign above swayed gently in the night breeze, Henson House, a safe place for widows. And for the first time in a long time, the word home meant peace. A year later, after the foundation opened its 3rd chapter house and the noise of the trial had faded into memory, I received an invitation I never expected. The studio lights were softer than I expected, warm, golden, the kind that made even scars look graceful. Across from me sat the host of Good Morning America, smiling with that practiced brightness people wear when they're about to ask something sharp but polite. Cameras blinked red. The segment title flashed on the screen behind us: Elder Empowerment, the woman who took back everything. Mrs. Henson, the host began, leaning forward just slightly, millions watched your story unfold. Your son was convicted, your house restored, and your foundation is helping women across the country. But some say what you did looked a lot like revenge. Was it? The studio fell quiet. I let the question hang for a moment, long enough for truth to find its breath. I smiled, slow and sure. Revenge, I said softly, is noisy. Justice is quiet. The host's expression softened. The crew behind the cameras nodded, even the lighting technician, who'd probably heard 1,000 stories more dramatic than mine. But this one was different, I think, because it wasn't about anger. It was about what happens after anger cools and a woman learns to walk on her own again. After the interview, they handed me a bouquet of lilies and a car to take me to O'Hare Airport, the same airport where, a year earlier, my son had left me with nothing but a suitcase and humiliation. This time, the sunlight caught the glass ceiling and scattered it across the floor like a promise kept. I rolled my small silver suitcase across the polished tiles, the heels of my shoes clicking in rhythm with my heart. The same automatic doors opened with a hiss, and instead of cold wind, I felt freedom brush past me. At the check-in counter, I handed over my ticket. The woman behind the desk smiled after scanning it. "First class, Mrs. Henson. You're all set." "Thank you," I said, returning her smile. The ticket wasn't charged to anyone's card but mine, paid in full by my own hand, my own name. As I walked toward the gate, I passed the same coffee shop where Clara once laughed at me for being too slow for travel. I stopped for a moment, not out of bitterness, but to savor the strange poetry of it all, how the same places could hurt you once and then heal you the next time around. At the gate, a young flight attendant greeted me with a bright grin. "Traveling alone today, ma'am?" I smiled, lifting my carry-on just enough for the light to catch the charm on the zipper, a small silver wing Harold had given me decades ago. "Not really," I said. "My dignity's coming with me." She laughed, helping me board. "Well, that's the best travel companion I've heard of." I settled into seat 1A again, the same spot where, not long ago, I'd watched Evan and Clara crumble in shame. The irony wasn't lost on me, but instead of triumph, I felt peace. True justice doesn't roar, it exhales. As the plane began to taxi, I looked out the window. The city shimmered below, the streets like silver veins under the late afternoon sun. Somewhere down there, people were rushing, fighting, forgetting what mattered, and here I was, weightless, untethered, exactly where I was meant to be. The engines roared to life, and the ground began to fall away. The seatbelt sign blinked, the sky opened, and for a moment, I felt Harold beside me, not as a ghost, but as something steadier, the echo of every word he'd ever said. You were the one who built their wings. He was right. I just needed to remember how to fly. The clouds split open into gold and violet as we climbed higher. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth fill me. They left me at an airport. I whispered to the wind beyond the glass. I left them at rock bottom. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm and sure. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached cruising altitude. Out the window, the horizon burned with the color of forgiveness, orange, soft, endless. The engines hummed like a lullaby. And that was my flight to freedom. From a cold airport floor to first class, from humiliation to peace, I learned that no one can leave you behind if you remember who you are. Justice doesn't always wear a badge or swing a gavel. Sometimes it takes the shape of an old woman holding her own ticket. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Grandma True Stories and hit the hype button to help us share more voices of strength, grace, and justice that never grows old. Until next time, keep your head high, your heart steady, and remember, even at 72, you can still choose your destination.